Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a fantastic guest for you today, coming from the city of Houston, Texas, Christopher Hensley. He's got a background in the financial services industry. He helps doctors, med students, high income professionals around financial planning, retirement, investments. He's got a radio podcast show called Money Matters, and it's on KPFT Houston. And he's also been on broader platforms, and I'm really happy to have him on the show. So, Chris, welcome.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be on the show. We were talking just a little bit before coming on here, and I realized that you had, you were right here at Baylor and Rice, just down the street from me. I'm in Bel Air area, so about 10 minutes from the medical center here in Houston. So really excited.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that. My wife and I, we live in the med center ourselves, and we kind of elope during the summer months. But yeah, so kind of start off by talking about what you do and introducing yourself to the audience. I know you're no stranger to the show, so and we'll dive right into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wear two hats. I got my financial planning practice, which is Houston First Financial Group. I specialize in working with clients 55 and up who are 5 to 10 years away from retirement. But what's unique is they're state employees. So a good bit of them are from University of Texas Health Science Center. A lot of healthcare workers, RNs, physicians. So I'm very familiar with that. My second hat that I wear is my podcasting hat, right? So this year is our 10-year anniversary of moneymatterspodcast.com. So I've been going on a podcasting tour on other podcasts on the other side of the microphone, just to kind of get the word out and let us know, in this world, 10 years is a long time for podcasting. So, and yeah, that's a little bit background, but financial planning, 22 years. So seen a little bit of everything. Yep.
Yeah, well, you've hit under so many things. What's interesting is podcasting. I started in 2020, and that's considered early, but there's like veterans that were like 2013, 2014. So we'll kind of dive out into it. And so you specialize in the medical industry and helping professionals. So what inspired you to help the medical profession around financial literacy? I know your approach has evolved over the years, and we'll talk about your strategies to promote financial literacy.
Yeah, so financial literacy, in fact, Baylor, when I think of Baylor College of Medicine, that was one of the ones that I went out to early on when I was doing a nonprofit called the Society for Financial Awareness, and we were doing financial literacy classes during Financial Literacy Month. So we literally came out to Baylor. The way that kind of has evolved from my personal practice is that it was initially just higher education. So people that were state employees. Baylor doesn't fall into that, but it has the unique thing that they're also healthcare workers, right? So I tend to it kind of just went that way. It niched down. I got a lot of people when I was younger. I was taking younger people into the practice, and so I got a lot of people who were just getting started into residency, and their situation was a lot different. Financial literacy for them was, I've got a ton of student loan debt. I've got a potential to be a peak income earner, but I'm not there yet. Plus, I'm working double shifts, and they've got me, completely burning the candle at both ends. And then fast forward to nowadays, where I'm looking at somebody who's got a mature practice. Maybe it's a physician who's either needing to sell their practice in the future. They might need to go back and renegotiate their contract with the organization that they're involved with or their practice is involved in. There's tax planning issues. There's it's a different animal altogether.
Yeah, it's interesting. And kind of along those same lines, how did the financial needs and wants of the medical community differ from those of just kind of like the mainstream? This audience also serves like dentists and lawyers and accountants, but how are their financial needs and wants different from others?
So for any of those professions we just mentioned, there's a steep learning curve. There's a high dollar amount right at the beginning, and it's the idea that at the end you're going to be making enough income to kind of pay back for your education, right? Doctors, therapists, RNs, all of them fall into that same class, right? Where there's going to be a required workload where you're kind of doing on the job training, right? You're learning, you're getting, but you're also still getting towards the end there. Now, after you get past that point, you're in your peak earnings years, and that makes you different than a lot of other professions out there. There is the potential for that kind of mountain of student loan debt, and we're talking about six figures. It is a hefty amount of student loan debt that you take with you into the working world. But at the end of the rainbow there, once you're done with that, your earning potential goes up right away, or it ramps up much quicker than a lot of other professions do. So there's the idea that you can kind of go back, you can be very aggressive on working on paying those student loans down. As when I'm thinking of people before they get to that point, right? They have a lot of the same questions. Should I buy real estate? Should I buy, what is the best way to be a financial steward for myself? And the difficulty there is you're not quite there yet. So you do all of the best practices, and you can be very smart and intentional about what you're doing. But until that you meet with the income is very forgiving, right? Once you get that income, you can kind of go back in and fill in the holes. Problem is if you haven't done a lot of the financial literacy, you're kind of ramping it up to know what the best practices are when you get there. A lot of times I tend to see doctors or not just doctors, that's a stereotype. I tend to see medical professionals that once you get this high compensation, you almost feel like, oh, I need to reward myself, right? I've been working like crazy for these past X number of years. Now I'm going to go buy that fancy Mercedes Benz. I'm going to go buy that big house. And what I encourage people to do is don't do that. Put that off until you can get some of these foundations of a good financial plan online first, right? Then we could go back and get the wants, but we want to get back to those very crucial fundamentals that now you have the financial means to do that.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about, the high income earner and the, kind of this lifestyle inflation that you alluded to. So, kind of along the lines of student loans. And my question for you is, healthcare has got a major headwinds, even though doctors make, high income, a lot of that money is eaten up by taxes and other things. So what are you seeing on the student loans? Because when I was in med school from 2000, and the mantra was like, oh, just take out student loans. It's backed by the government, and you'll always pay it back. But then, I mean, if you look at 2008 and then COVID, how are med students approaching student loans these days?
Yeah, so it's kind of all over the place. What I would say that's changed from that time period to now is, if I think 5-10 years back, I was hearing a lot of people trying to use student loan forgiveness as a strategy. And it's not to say that there may not be some solution there, but that is extremely volatile. I've gone out and given classes on student loans before, and the student loan forgiveness thing is a very volatile, moving target, right? So I always say I encourage people to get a plan that's separate from that, and anything that we get that they forgive after public service or teaching or something like that after a 10-year mark, good. But let's not count on anything, because it's very political, volatile. At one point we thought we had something, and then that changed up. So I would just encourage people to pay back the student loans when they can. Now, anytime I think of loans in general, it's always kind of a side-by-side cost comparison of, well, is the money going to make more in the market or in your savings account or in something else versus the interest rate of what the loan is? So you do want to do that with intention. You want to go back and look. But I am also somebody who just doesn't like carrying debt. So I always try to encourage people to pay off debt when they can. Sometimes it makes sense, and sometimes it doesn't. And really, a lot of it has to do with what current interest rates are on something like stable value or fixed, what you would get by just putting it in a savings account. that's different today than it was 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah, really, really insightful question because I know that med students really have to be cognizant of student loans. So the other question, because recently before it was like everybody was trying to vie for like Harvard Med School or UCSF, these very high price tag schools, and then now people are getting smarter, like Baylor. It's like it's private, but you pay, if you're in state, it's like you get a very good public rate for a fantastic education. So, and then I know recently a lot of like NYU's giving like scholarships and kind of waiving some of the first year and second year to adjust for these outrageous costs. The other question I get quite frequently is for med students or people about to graduate, and they're like, the mantra was like, oh, buy a house in residency, it's a good investment. Is that the case now? I know, I know that's kind of, kind of up in the air, and I know it's a lot
Yeah.
trickier because before it was like, yeah, just, Baylor residents, they would just buy a house but now it's kind of trickier. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I am a huge advocate of home ownership and buying real estate. But and a big asterisk here, yes, that's always it can always be a moving target. And we think of things like, interest rate sensitivity. What are interest rates doing right now? The idea of appreciation rate on where you buy it, right? You always want to you make money when you purchase property, so you want to get it in an area that's got an appreciation rate. Now, we don't have a crystal ball that doesn't always hold true. I'm here in Houston. We just had that big hurricane. Things change, and just even the idea we were talking earlier, me and my wife, about property and casualty insurance for home ownership, right? Just the idea of people making massive claims in California and Texas right now, the ability of those insurers to even write policies to protect them, which you need if you're going to get a mortgage to invest in real estate or purchase real estate, right? There's the idea that it's just kind of drying up, that insurance companies aren't writing those homeowner policies anymore. There's been some speculation and talk about even having state run insurance, right? So what do you do if the insurance companies won't insure it? And we're talking about something that would just make the mortgage company whole, right? Not the insured. So I hope that doesn't I hope that's not where we're going. But it does. It's not necessarily a great answer for you, but it adds a lot of caveats there, kind of what's going on real time here in Texas. With all of that being said, I still love real estate. I still encourage people to, it's one of the you're going to be paying somebody if you're not paying yourself, right? So if you're renting, you're paying somebody else's mortgage somewhere. So that's one of the very first. There's few things that I could just make a blanket statement that it's a good idea. Everybody's situation's different, but I strongly encourage people to purchase something along those first. Once you start getting some money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Once the state or the government gets their hands in things, that's like one way to, kind of almost surefire way to ruin things. But the and I love that. I mean, Houston is still very affordable, especially like in condo land and those, you can get a decent condo for like 150K, like 20 years ago it was like 60, 70K. So I mean, still it's not outrageous like San Francisco or New York City or Boston, these. So it might be if you want to for the long term. But again, Houston gets hurricanes and flooding and so
Right. There's a cost there for
yeah.
that for sure. Yep.
Yeah. The other question I have, because you alluded to this, because like for example, there's a lot of great books saying, start saving, start investing earlier, the more time that you can have a nest egg that compounds. But then, this idea of like paying down student loans. So like as med students, should they be putting like $100, $200 into like just just investing in kind of dollar cost averaging or just saving that money and paying down student loans? You kind of alluded to earlier, but I just wanted to get it out in the air.
Yeah, absolutely. So just the ability to save, right? So where the money goes, that's another question. But the ability to put, and I am even on the aggressive side, you'll hear people often throw out the number of you should be saving about 10% of your annual income each and every year. because I work with people closer to the other side of retirement, where it doesn't go right, where people are confident, overconfident, that they are there, and then they run out of money, right? So I tend to tell people, try to put about 20% of your income aside. And some people, well, Chris is crazy. That's a lot of money to put aside. But you never get to that age and say, well, I had too much money, right? Put aside. That's a good problem to have. Where the money goes, though, right? I'm essentially agnostic on some of that, right? So part of that is, let's get this number put aside as savings. And then the second piece of that is where it goes. So I'm a big advocate of pay yourself first. I'm not saying not to pay your student loans. That's probably number one or number two. But there are some situations where, for instance, right now with interest rates being so high on just going, if you went to get a CD at a local bank, the interest rate's 5.38 or 5.35. Now this is gonna be recorded, so just know this does not reflect real time. But at the time, you could walk into your local bank and get something pretty high. This is not the same conversation we would have been having 2 years ago. We had 20-year lows on interest rates. So there's going to be unique times in history where even just putting it in the savings account is going to outpace what you would currently be paying on a loan that you may have gotten 4 or 5 years ago that's super duper low. Now, the thing with interest rates rising, if you get a student loan today, the interest rate on the student loans are going to go up with interest rates rising, right? So as we see these cash equivalents, our savings accounts, our checking accounts with a little tiny bit of interest on there start going up, the student loan interest rates go up as well. So this is unique for people who maybe had student loans, but they're 5, 10 years back and the interest rate is low. That's when you would say, well, we don't get too aggressive. We pay that low interest rate, and then we move that money into something else that's going to earn a higher interest rate. So again, everybody's situation is different. I always say, look, it's a number thing. We got to look at it side by side to look at it. But having that strategy in the back of your head is a good way to come at it, to approach it.
Yeah. And even, you're talking about the 10 to 20% savings. And if you start as a med student, you can do a Roth IRA or whatnot. And then, you allow that, you put it into an index, NASDAQ or S&P or whatever, and you just let it compound, that'll most likely over like 10, 20, 30 years, outperform, the interest rate that you're paying on the student loan. So kind of offset what, the cost of your education. Then other question I get for you is, again, with doctors, it's really an interesting phenomenon. And what are your thoughts? Because, doctors are known for living a lavish lifestyle. And then I've heard stories, doctors, you thought they were very financially well off, and then come COVID, and then you find out they're broke. So how do you balance this idea of consumption versus spending and saving? Because you can see like the beautiful houses, cars, vacations, and then dig deeper, you find out they're broke. So why is that?
That's a thing. So that's always been a thing. So even before I was a financial advisor, I worked at Consumer Credit Counselor Southwest. And believe it or not, when we did budget counseling, we would get calls from not just doctors, but high income earning professionals from each and every profession that you could think of, right? So there's this phenomenon that when people get high income coming in, a lot of times their lifestyle goes right up alongside it. And I think it's that psychological thing that I mentioned earlier, that you feel entitled to for this reward, right? So you've been working very hard, and so seeing that on the other side of it, that's one of the main reasons I work with people 55 and up. Is I used to go out and say, make house calls, right? Don't do that anymore, but I used to go sit and visit with people, and the younger people, they would impress me with the vacations that they've been on, and they would have the fancy cars. And there's something about that magic number of 55. When I got there, those people, none of that stuff was important. They wanted to know, how much do I need to retire and when can I retire? So knowing that that's kind of where we're all going, the idea of keeping up with the Joneses, the materialism stuff, it works against us when we're trying to just do things that basically we want to be in a position where we have the confidence that we have enough savings or investments set aside, pensions, all set aside that number equals either our current salary or enough that we are confident that we can, if we replace our paycheck with this, maybe it's 70% of your current income, that you have that. If you don't have that, you got to go back to the drawing board. And so that's when a lot of those vacations, the fancy stuff that we all tend to go to, right? That's when that stuff kind of goes out the back door there, and people tend to focus. The earlier, the better. We can do a lot more good 5-10 years before, if it's a year out or a 3 year out, and you make that realization. I'm not saying it's never too late, right, to get your act together financially, but it's never too early to get started. And what you mentioned earlier, I'm just going to piggyback on that. The idea of just getting something into either an index fund or just dollar cost averaging, just the basics of investing. We're not even, I do active management. We're not even talking about complex active management. We're just talking about being disciplined about putting that money aside and paying yourself first. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that. And kind of so along those same lines, it's almost like your income does not really translate to wealth. It can if you do the right things, but people just kind of see this shiny object, and really wealth is kind of like what you don't see. Like I know a doctor, he drives a 2002 Camry from med school, and
I love it.
his net worth is like 20 million, but he doesn't want to, like, he doesn't care, like he doesn't want to be showy. So really interesting. So for the med students, people graduating, people starting med school, how can they reach out to you, get more advice, talk to you, and work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the two places that you can find me for my for-profit practice is www.houstonfirstfinancialgroup.com. There's a link on there to schedule a complimentary consultation. And then just for listening for topics like this, we've gone through many topics that would be interesting for that type of person over the last 10 years at moneymatterspodcast.com. So just going back, looking at those, reaching out, emailing us. If we can answer a question, we'd be happy to answer it or point you to where we might have been there before. So,
yeah, I love that. And for all the audience, I really enjoyed this. It's like kind of doctors and the medical profession is really have very unique needs and wants. So it's really important to find someone who can understand that and can tailor their advice to your particular situation. And so be sure to give Chris's socials a like and follow, and reach out to him. And thanks so much for coming on.